Listen to it. There it is. The familiar 4-litre twin turbocharged V8. Yes, it is back. Now, welcome. Before we get threading these wonderful Malibu Canyon roads. And speaking of my geographical location, that is also a significant reason as to why the launch is out here in Malibu. Yes, it's absolutely stunning and the sun is shining, but also, and this is massive news, the RS6 is for the first time ever available in North America. This is massive. I remember when I used to post a lot of content surrounding my RS6, there was endless comments from the audience in the US, quite rightly complaining why they didn't get this car out here. Well, now you do, and now I am so excited to be able to share this with you. The first drive on your home soil, no less. So, monumental moment indeed. It very quickly unfolded through living with that car that there are very few platforms that tick as many boxes as the RS6. Truth be told, I'm actually a little bit nervous about this review. I think this car is so many things to so many people that I just hope that Audi have really hit the nail on the head with this car. I think over the years, it's safe to say that the RS6 in particular has crafted its own sort of cult, its cult status amongst the practical petrolhead society. And now here we are in the C8, the latest generation RS6, and it's a whole new platform. It's a rebirth, really, of an icon, and it's Audi's attempt at improving on everything that was already so awesome about the C7. So let's just crack on with it. As I mentioned on the intro, 4-litre twin turbocharged V8, developing 600 horsepower. But importantly here, while the 600 horsepower isn't a power improvement or power gain over the C7 RS6, or at least the C7 RS6 performance, the torque is. It's another 100 Newton meters of torque more. Now we get wrapped up in horsepower figures, but of course it's the torque which gives you the thrust, that feeling of dramatic acceleration which compresses the diaphragm against the seat. Oh, and there's plenty. It's absolutely ballistic. Now, of course, we're still running the Quattro all-wheel drive system. I find myself today, even though it's the middle of November, here in Malibu, it's 30 degrees. And so we've got plenty of heat in these sticky tires. And then on top of that, we've got the vast, endless void of traction that is the Quattro all-wheel drive system. So that familiar formula stays the same. What has changed, however, and this is predominantly within the realms of dynamics, because as a platform it stays fairly similar. Yes, it's built on an entirely new architecture, but it's that familiar and lovable 5-seater, big boot, practical all-wheel drive, powerful format, which is the fundamental basis of why this car is so many things to so many people, and why it's a sort of realistically aspirational car, because on the one hand, it can do this, and then if I tap the RS mode button here and drop it down into chill mode, it can do this. And it does both of those things, both of those extremes, incredibly well. And that's the appeal of this platform. But first of all, I conveniently find myself on one of the most incredible driving roads out here in Malibu. It's a canyon road and it twists and turns like one of the finest alpine stretches I've ever experienced. So I feel incredibly lucky to be on here with this car, namely because for the first time on an RS6 product, the option of rear wheel steer and a fancy RS6 specific differential is now available to option. Now, it wasn't that the RS6 previously was a slouch. No, that thing was a real brute, proper straight line puncher, and to be fair, even in corners, it was relatively dynamic for its size and weight. This car, with the new rear wheel steer and fancy RS diff, it takes corners like a double jointed stoat. It is so agile. I mean, I can't tell you the kind of road I'm on right now. And then after the apex, that familiar and famous dramatic swell of torque that catapults you out of the apex. Wonderful. Oh, we're really tight here. Now, if you pay attention to my hands, you might notice that I've been going around some pretty tight roads, but not once have I had to readjust my hands on the steering wheel in order to cope with these switchbacks. The agility of this car. Now, I mean, this is really tight. It's amazing. There is also one more fancy feature, which is new for RS6. There's actually a little motor on the steering column, which effectively creates an artificial ratio for you, so you don't have to input as much steering angle to get out a vast amount of steering input. It's really trick stuff. I mean, look, this is a proper switchback, and I'm not even crossed up. It's an amazing thing. This car, well over 2 tons. Oh God, it's so quick. It's well over 2 tons. But combined with this vast swell of torque, we're now just shy of 600 pounds-feet of torque now, which is dramatic. And to slow it all down, carbon ceramic brakes, which, I mean, I can't believe these words are about to come out of my mouth. This is running a 10-cylinder brake caliper, 10-pot. Even after some very swift, spirited driving, that sharp, immediate bite is always there. There's very, very little fade. In fact, fade would be a disservice to what's happening here. It's more of a sort of bedding in, a settling of brake pad and fluid as the heat builds up in the carbon ceramic disc. Oh, it settles in wonderfully. I'm still getting over this torque. Now I'm going to address something head on, which I've not been looking forward to, and that is the gearbox. Now, when I did the first look of this car a few months back in Germany, I learned that this is now running a more conventional torque converter gearbox, but it is for the first time 8-speed gearbox. Now, what that does is allows for the RPM between gears to not jump too much either up or down, effectively allowing the engine to stay within its peak operating band more often than not, meaning when you come out of these tight switchbacks or whenever you want to basically experience the massive power of this car, more often than not, as a result of these shorter gear ratios, the engine is operating at its optimal, meaning you've got big thrust all the time. However, back to the gearbox, I'm still disappointed that they didn't put a twin clutch in it. Now, speaking with the engineers, they'll throw all sorts of things at you like, you know, a more conventional torque converter automatic is better for dealing with torque, and it provides a smoother gear shift when you're driving around town. Yes, but also, take for example the Porsche Panamera Sport Turismo. That runs big power, big torque, and you guessed it, a twin clutch gearbox. Now, for the driving part of this car, which, let's face it, if you're buying this car, that's the only reason you would buy this over a more standard A6. The RS6 is the bit where you want to turn it up to 11, find yourself on a road like this, and you just want to exploit it for all it's worth. On this road, which, as I'm sure you've gathered right now, it's a proper driver's road. It's very tight and twisty, and sadly, I don't think the calibration and character of this gearbox lends itself quite as well, and this is the important bit, on this kind of road as it might do using a twin clutch box, particularly under heavier braking and downshifts. While it is faster in the actual actuation of the shift than the previous box, it's when the engine and gearbox decides to allow you to be able to make that shift is the biggest difference between a twin clutch and a more conventional auto. And this, again, I want to reiterate, on this kind of road. So yes, if you do, for whatever reason, find yourself driving up the canyons of Malibu or through the Alps, this won't be quite as dynamic and agile as if it did have a twin clutch box in. However, you're not going to find yourself on roads like this every day. And so In the real world, when it comes to a truthful application of this gearbox, yes, for 95% of the time, the application of this box is probably just fine. However, that doesn't concern me. What does concern me is how much this first drive is going to cost me. And I think that pretty much summarizes it, really. Gearbox opinions to one side. I mean, before we get to concluding this drive, they've gone and done it again. They've gone and made one of the most complete, all-round, practical driver's package you can probably find. It's just awesome. And it looks so good. It looks brilliant. I mean, they've really stepped it up. The previous gen C7 RS6, that had a grille that said, "Dispatch yourself from my vicinity, I am coming through." This swallows the vicinity up entirely, creates its own Audi black hole, and spits you out the other side into a different dimension. And then it backs it up with all of that power. Now suspension. Very trick indeed. So Audi actually offer two variations of suspension. Think of it as a more conventional sort of adaptive coil spring setup, and then a 3-cylinder air suspension system, which this is using right now. Now what that affords and what that provides is a vast spectrum of adaptability when it comes to comfort and handling. So in comfort mode, in fact I shall put that on right now using the dynamic select switch just down here. Let's go dynamic, auto, comfort. Okay, so we're in comfort right now. Remarkable. What is most remarkable, and something that I haven't touched on, which comes in part with the 10-pot brake calipers. You can't accommodate that size of brake without increasing the circumference of the wheel. So in order to wedge in massive carbon ceramic brakes and vast calipers, you've got to take on board a larger alloy wheel to fit them with inside. This is now wearing a 22-inch wheel, and then that is wrapped in a properly low-profile tire, okay? Now, I'm stressing these 2 points because, first of all, aesthetically, wonderful. Historically, massive wheels and low-profile tires generally translate to a compromise in ride quality and comfort and ambient road noise. Whatever witchcraft and calibration Audi have done with the tires, the suspension, and the sound deadening within this car is remarkable. You see bumps that certainly on the previous gen RS6 would definitely be transmitted through your spine. Well, certainly in sports mode when everything gets stiff. On this, I don't know how they've done it. This 3-cylinder air suspension makes comfort genuinely comfortable. I mean, it is Grand Tourer status comfy. And then you dial it up and put it into dynamic. And this is getting a bit boring now, so let's put it into dynamic. There we go. Yes, put it into dynamic. Immediately, you feel the whole thing get taut, it's stiff, it sort of gets on its tiptoes, and everything just gets a little bit sharper. And as I'm sure you can see by the way I'm bouncing around right now, it does get distinctly stiffer. I think if you've ever had a love for RS6, be from an owner's point of view or a fan's point of view, you can all sit back happy, and you can all still either aspire to owning one or look forward to buying one, because it's so much fun. And then that's on top of me forgetting that you could fit an ISOFIX in the back with your kid, dog in the boot, mother and mother-in-law along for the ride, and your best mate riding shotgun. And you can all do that with a 0 to 60 time of 3.5 seconds. And that's what this car is all about. Just dynamic practicality in a package like almost no other. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Leave your questions and comments below. I know there will be plenty of them. Let me know what you think of this car. and let me know what else you would like to see on this channel from RS6 content. I've got a funny feeling there'll be plenty more to come. Ciao.